Good afternoon. I hope you enjoyed the lunch. I really did. Thank you very much for providing that for us. And I just want to echo what everybody else has said, which is it's an honor to honor Athina and to be invited to this session to celebrate her life and her research and her very important contribution both to science and to the world. And truly, I was telling Mark the other day that the world was a better place with Athina in it, and I think we all can very heartily agree to that. So this session 3 is to discuss her contributions to mentorship in promoting women in science. We have 7 speakers, and we'll each just be making a very brief presentation, and a lot of it will be personal. And I get to do what everybody else does, which is to figure out how to put my slide up. I just have one. Mm-hmm.
Okay, here.
There it is. Okay. All right, so Athina was the Greek goddess of reason, intelligent activity, arts, and the literature. She was fierce and brave in battle. How apt that Athina Markou was named after her. As was so aptly put by Igor Grant in his memoriam, Athina Markou will be remembered by her colleagues and friends for her incisive intellect, her courage, her style, and her honesty. Dr. Markou truly believed women were equal and could do anything they put their mind to. And she was an important role model to other women in this and men in this regard, especially those struggling to succeed, as you've heard from her students today. She herself had obstacles that we often don't think about. She had to overcome, both as a woman, from another country, speaking another language, and having other customs. But she transitioned so smoothly in our lives that we often forget the fact that she had to overcome these obstacles, and even above that became the really rocket superstar scientist that she was. And like the goddess Athena, Dr. Markou rose to the occasion of overcoming her obstacles with great success, in several cases breaking the glass ceiling. In science, for example, getting the Ephron Award at ACNP that is rarely given to women. And in the Department of Psychiatry, being given an important administrative role in the department that had not been given to women previously. In this session, we'll be talking about Athina's contributions to women in science and mentorship, as I said. Athina promoted women and men's careers in many ways. She served on important committees and was an active contributor to the Women's Task Force at ACNP. But perhaps her greatest contribution was to act as a role model, using her honesty and her courage to encourage and mentor others to succeed, as you've heard earlier today from her students. Her can-do attitude was infectious and engendered optimism, and several people have commented that just talking to her changed their lives. Even though she was 10 years younger than me and much more beautiful, I would seek her out to discuss difficult situations, and as a friend and a colleague, I miss her greatly. On this topic, we will now hear from several of her students and colleagues. And the first person that we will hear from is Nuri Amitai.
Hello, and thank you very much for the opportunity to be here and to join in remembering Athina, who's been such an important part of my life. I cannot speak to all the many ways in which Athina contributed, of course, to the promotion of women in sciences. So I'm just going to speak to sort of a very small personal example of it as it related to me. In the ways that I saw Athina's mentorship and promotion of women in sciences was very often one of show, don't tell, of really just modeling and sort of setting it up so that the best way I can describe it is I'm reminded of something my mother told me when I was getting a little older, that when I was a child, she never told me, oh, Nuri, you can do science and math just as good as any boy. Because she thought that by telling me this, she would even just bring up the idea that anyone would even question this, that this was even something that anyone would consider pertinent at all. And she didn't even want to raise that idea in my head. She would just treat it as if it was assumed, as if it was obvious that, of course, I could do the same. And that's how I saw Athina's mentorship, in that she approached her mentees in the assumption that, of course, you can do this. Of course, you can rise to this challenge. Of course, you're ready to complete this. I can only take one small example, and there are many, which was the first time she had me peer review a manuscript. And I was very, very green. I'd just started in her lab, not been there for a year yet. And she said, I have this manuscript that I'm supposed to peer review, but I think you should do it. I was just absolutely mortified, because I'm here, this new grad student. How can I critique somebody else's research? Will my criticism be in any way relevant or accurate? Will I catch all the things? Absolutely mortified. And she was completely unfazed. She was like, of course you can do this, and don't worry about this. You just do what you write as you think best, and then don't worry, we're not going to let anything out that isn't accurate. I'm going to review everything and make sure that what goes out is accurate. But then she let me do it by myself. She gave me a couple of templates to see what was expected, but she did not interfere at all and just let me do it on my own. And then afterwards, she reviewed it and adjusted as was needed, and then let me see it again before it went out, and never pitched it as, here's what you did wrong or what you should have done better, but just showed me how it was different so I could draw my own conclusions about what could be done differently, and did that again and again so that my own reviewing got better and better and I could do it on my own. And so that also my name got to be part of the reviewer pool, so that journals would approach me directly, which down the line turned out to be extremely helpful to me, both in my eventual green card application and in my transitioning into a scientific writing context. And as for peer reviewing, so it was for numerous other things, stereotaxic surgeries, complex behavioral paradigms, statistical analysis, and on and on and on. It was approached in the assumption that, of course, this is something that you can rise to and you can achieve, and then provide me with all the support to actually be able to do so, and to never make me struggle without having all the resources at hand. And that was, I know it's a cliche term, especially in this context, but it was incredibly empowering. To sort of have it be approached that there's never a question that you can do this. And I don't know if I have any time for an additional anecdote. How am I doing on time? 3 minutes. So just to briefly address another aspect, which is that Athina's support and mentorship extended well beyond when you were inside her laboratory. After I left, after I got my Ph.D. and defended, and found myself at the end of my first postdoc in a bit of a pickle. My postdoc laboratory lost a lot of funding, had to lay somebody off, and that person ended up being me. And being on a visa, this threatened my ability to even stay in the country. I was looking for a position. This was 2010 in the Bay Area, so things were without a green card. It was very tricky. And I had only mentioned this to Athina simply to let her know there might be some people calling you as a reference since you're my thesis advisor. This was all I mentioned to her. Within 24 hours, without me having brought up anything at all, she called me back and said, by the way, if you need somewhere to sort of take over your visa, I know that you could do some good work as a postdoc in my lab. You can come for a while. And I said at the time, I had some more months left to job hunt. I'm going to try and stay in the Bay Area. Thank you so much, though. at this point, she would have been well within her rights to say, well, suit yourself, ungrateful wench, or something nicer, but entirely within her rights. And instead, within a couple more days, she calls back again and says, I understand where you're coming from, and I've been looking, I have all these writing assignments that I can't get to, and that I would love to complete. I have people in my lab completing grant applications who are not necessarily native speakers and would do well with an editor. Would you like to work as a scientific writer and editor? I could take over your visa and you could do it remotely from the Bay Area. And so I did, and it was an amazing opportunity. I do believe that it was what allowed me to stay in the United States and eventually develop the career that I have now. But this was something that she proactively suggested to me. I never even asked for it, and that was the kind of ongoing support that she offered to somebody who at the time had already, had moved on, but was always there for me in my time of need. So I wanted to thank you very much again for letting me speak.
Thank you, Cindy. And thank you very much to the organizer of this symposium. It's very heartening to be associated to it. And to see how much she impacted people. She impacted me. I can see it extended very far. I was a postdoctoral fellow with Athina starting in 2006. I must say she's the one who brought me to the United States, and I've been sticking there since. I ended up only spending 15 months working in Athina's lab, but the influence she had on me has been very powerful and long-lasting. I've been lucky to have great mentors throughout my career, but I spend more time with them than I did with her, and still on a daily basis, I can really tell the role model she's been to not only me as a scientist doing my science, the way I run experiments, the way I analyze my data with the meticulousness, I think that was brought up earlier on, that she's been showing to me when I was a postdoc with her. But now I realize, being myself getting older on the career track, I'm mentoring people myself. And I realize I try to reproduce what she's been doing to them, because I really appreciated many aspects of her interaction with me. So as I said, she had an attention to detail that is a very good match to my personality. We ended up spending a long time in her office, and now I even value that more because I can see how you can get busy with a lot of different things as a PI. But she would dedicate the time and the energy it takes to go over data and not just accept a result as it is, but go through the methodology and the interpretation. I wrote 2 manuscripts with her, one which I was the first author. This manuscript took months of editing and rewriting, but for its betterment, for sure. But it was really a testimony of how much importance she was giving to the proper way of doing things and the proper way of conveying them to the public. On a personal aspect, I must say another thing that I'm trying to reproduce, because I think it really made me also a better scientist in the lab, was she was considering her mentees, as a whole person, not just as somebody running experiments for her. And so she was caring. Caring is one of the adjectives that comes up to my mind when I think of Athina. She was caring for her mentees for their career development. As we've seen, we're seeing, some of our postdocs right now at UCSD. I mean, she's been fostering their development. She's been teaching, so even though I didn't stay in her group, she taught me skills that have been tremendously helpful for me to succeed so far as a faculty. I can think of grant writing, for instance. She was the first one who had me read her grant, and really understand the NIH process. And she was very didactic. I mean, I still have a lot to do as a mentor like that, but she really tried to have me understand what was behind just, writing a grant, the way it's being reviewed and scored. So that was really helpful for the subsequent steps. And so, in terms of career development, but also in terms of you feeling well, in your family life or private life. The anecdote I have regarding that is, and maybe she could relate to that as being a foreigner, being brought on a new country, as you were mentioning, Cindy. I guess she could understand the kind of things that I was going through. But so I remember when we were interviewing, and she was like really wanting me to join her lab, and I really wanted to join her lab. One of her first questions was whether I had a boyfriend at that time, and I said, yes, I do. And so, okay, well, so what's the plan? And I was like, I'm going to come here and get settled, and if it works out well, then he will come later. She said, no, you got to bring him with you. So she basically got married because of Athina. I still remember going on my on subsequent interviews. I was interviewing in several labs and being in a carpool car with a bunch of people I didn't know, and announcing them I was going to tell my boyfriend, that we were going to have to get married so we could come together. A rationale being that it's going to be very hard to make him come later, and for the visa procedure. And she was so right. I mean, all this thing was already complicated enough that it would have been maybe not happening if I had come by myself. So I'm very grateful. It's an anecdote, but it's just a symbol of the big picture vision she had of how well you must be in your life to be a successful scientist as well. Keeping that in mind when I'm expecting great data from my postdoc, but remembering that they need to be happy beings as well to be successful. And I don't know how many minutes are left. 1 minute. Her attention to detail, or care, the fact that she's very caring, the fact that she was very energizing, I think, is another feature that was a good match to my personality, and that I also try to replicate in my interaction with my mentees, fellow. She would give you the feeling that everything was achievable, and I think she was a living example that it was true. It's easy to get frustrated for sure, but even pessimistic about the future in the career we have chosen. And she was the very good way of boosting morale and making you look forward with a smile and always doing your best. She was setting high expectations, and I think that's a very good way to proceed. You always arrive higher like that. So I hope I can already add that she was definitely an excellent role model. I don't think what I've said is particular to women. I think she's been doing a tremendous job with our male mentees as well. But for sure, seeing this tiny woman be so successful will remain a vivid image of a track I want to follow in my life. Thank you.
I'd like to thank Mark and the organising committee for giving me the opportunity to come and remember Athina together. I'd like to talk a little bit about some of the things that I learnt from Athina, specifically to myself personally, and the impact that they had on my scientific career, rather than Athina's role as a mentor for women in science in general. These points, I think, are important things that I learnt from Athina that are important for any scientist, male, female, gender, race, creed, anything. They're really qualities that were embodied by Athina in her life's work, at least from my perspective. These 4 qualities are independence, collaboration, commitment, and passion. With regard to independence, I first met Athina in 2003 at the Society for Neuroscience conference in New Orleans. I'd applied for a Ph.D. position with John Cryan in his lab. The position, as well as that position, many other positions, was funded by a very large multi-million-dollar grant to an industry-academia collaboration, which was funded by the NIMH and NIDA. And it was given to John and Athina to work on the development of GABA B receptor compounds for depression and smoking. My interview with Athina in that regard was kind of like a job interview, but she dealt with that very quickly and very efficiently, and it's my lasting memories of our discussion was more about her advice on how important it was for me to establish my independence as a scientist. And I don't just mean in general, but I mean from my life partner, then now husband, Daniel Hoyer. So Daniel is, of course, a senior scientist, well established in his own right, has been for a number of years. Athina spoke with intensity about her own career and her marriage to Mark, and the importance of being able to work together, which is a very rewarding thing to do when you're a married couple, but also to be able, it was absolutely imperative to be able to stand alone scientifically. And she was the embodiment of that very much herself, as I think we all appreciate from the strength of her career. Even though this was the first time Athina and I had met, she didn't avoid the subject. She certainly didn't consider it a private matter. She dived straight in, as was her tendency to do so, with the absolute goal of ensuring that I understood the importance of this point. And it was advice that I have taken and am very pleased to have done so, and I give it to others. Collaboration is key. So Athina has a long history of collaboration, as many in the room here can testify to, and have done so this morning. She collaborated with academic scientists and those from industry, and she was acutely aware of the importance of collaboration as a means to achieving her goals and the goals of her collaborators. My knowledge of Athina's collaborations is based primarily on her work with Novartis, of course, in particular the GABA-B grant that she and John obtained. This grant brought together medicinal chemists, pharmacologists, molecular biologists and behavioural neuroscientists under one umbrella across 2 countries. The many people involved in the grant, but quite a few of them are here today. So John Cryan, of course, is here. Linda Brady is here from NIMH, who was one of the main coordinators for the grant. Paul Kenny, we heard from this morning. Svetlana is here. Stella is here. Andre is here. And of course, Athina is here in our hearts and our minds. It was a very productive grant. In addition to generating new chemical matter, we heard about BHF 177 this morning from Elliot Gardner, which was a derivative of GS39783, a positive modulator for GABA-B receptors. It also generated a very large number of publications. The grant code U01MH69062 currently as a search term in PubMed will give you 36 hits. And more publications are set to come, are still coming from Andre and from Athina's lab, and also from John and myself and a few others. Athina also collaborated with others at Novartis, notably Daniel Hoyer, publishing on serotonin and 5-HT1A receptors and somatostatin, and also collaborating on the postdoctoral work of John Cryan himself. Athina also worked with Fabrizio Gasparini, Gino Van Hecke and John himself on metabotropic glutamate receptors, as well as working with Mark Tricklebank and Paul Hurling. One of the very specific lessons I learned from Athina with regard to collaboration is that when collaborations reach an impasse, there will always, ultimately, be room to forgive and forget and move forward. As such, to Athina, there was no such thing as a permanently broken collaboration. Grudges may be personal, but they should never be professional, and she adhered to that rigidly, I think. And collaborations can be re-established and fruitful as long as there is mutual benefit for both parties. In this regard, it is also very clear that commitment was an overarching factor in Athina's success. Everybody here who knew Athina and knows that once she'd set her goals, she was completely committed to achieving them and would go to extreme lengths to do so. She was an exceptionally hard worker with a formidable organisational ability and a very direct style who would not be swayed from her path. Her output in publications, grants, studentships and postdoctoral fellowships is testimony to her commitment and an evident driver of her success. I'd like to briefly talk about my last main point when it comes to Athina, and that is her passion. Athina had a very strong passion for her work and a very strong sense of drama. I have seen Athina at her most fiery explosiveness when something blocked her in her path. Sometimes this feature was challenging for Athina, but she never made excuses or apologised for it. It was simply who she was, and it emanated from her very person. In this regard, she also had a tremendous presence. You never had to ask, is Athina in the room? Harnessing this passion, however, was a driving force for Athina's success, pushing her through barriers and giving her stamina. was also something that she encouraged in her mentees, knowingly or otherwise, and left me and many others with the knowledge that passion and empowerment are two sides of the same coin. And so I'd like to conclude to say that, to me, Athina was the embodiment of independence, collaborative spirit, commitment, and passion in her life's work. The warm invitation to speak today helps me to solidify these principles in my mind and shows me that I can continue to learn from Athina now that she's gone. It's now my duty and my pleasure to pass on the importance of these qualities in a scientist and a scientific career to my future mentees. Thank you.
Thanks everyone for organizing this wonderful symposium for Athina, especially Mark and Andre, appreciate it. So my background is actually, I'm a clinical psychologist, and I became aware of Athina's work, I guess around 15 years ago, as I was researching depression in smokers and human smokers going through nicotine withdrawal. And as I looked at her research at that time, it struck me that it was particularly elegant, but to me it best captured the human experience, what smokers were going through when they went through nicotine withdrawal, better than anything that I could see otherwise in terms of animal models. So as I started working towards my postdoc in genetic epidemiology and psychiatric genetics at WashU, I started working on a K award. And so I contacted Athina because my K award was maybe similar to some, but maybe slightly different. I had a team of mentors to kind of make it very multidisciplinary, right along Athina's line. Of course, she's very multidisciplinary. And so I contacted her to see if she'd be willing to be a mentor in my ward, particularly to help inform the neurobiology of nicotine withdrawal. And she was more than willing to join me. And immediately, as everyone has spoke to here, we started working on the pilot project that I was working on for my K award. So I was doing a human laboratory study of nicotine withdrawal, and my goal, in part, I had a few things. I was doing some genetic association and some secondary data analysis of twin data, but I also had a human laboratory study of nicotine withdrawal because I wanted to better refine the phenotype of nicotine withdrawal, which is a challenge that Athina has taken on throughout her career too. So we were definitely kindred spirits. And so immediately in my pilot study, we talked about, okay, what tasks can we put into my study that are going to parallel what she's been doing in rodent models in her lab? And so we started down that road, and we wanted to look at 3 different aspects of nicotine withdrawal. When people go through nicotine abstinence, we theorized, at least our animal studies, and from her lab certainly suggested that people might experience increase in physical symptoms, increased negative affect, which we primarily wanted to focus on, and then maybe decrease in positive affect, increase in negative affect, and physical symptoms. So we thought there might be 3 domains, but as it ends up, most of the research suggests that negative affect is probably the biggest component of nicotine withdrawal, both in humans and in animals. So we focused on that quite a bit. And she was very helpful in terms of helping me design the task, think about what tasks are going to best mirror what's going on in animals. And as you can imagine, the goal of this research is if we can try to surpass that translational bottleneck that often happens in animal studies. They don't necessarily translate to treatments that work. So we're hoping, maybe we can better model in animals what we see in humans, as Diego has mentioned too. So that was the ultimate goal. And so, what I came to realize as I worked with Athina more, and you've all spoke to this too, is how much she cares about her work and the conditions that she's studying specifically in the people that she works with. So I went to, as soon as I got my K award, which I got the first time around, probably in part, definitely thankful to Athina for that. She was extremely helpful in helping me get that funded the first time around. So I came to visit her in her lab when she was at Scripps in La Jolla, and she really received me like I was part of her laboratory family at that time. It was a wonderful experience. She had me meet with as many people as I could when I came to visit. She had me see as many of the animal models as I could and the procedures that I could see during my visit. And it was I think really notable to me, and I think Diego spoke to this, I think what continues to make Athina's legacy so empowering and so powerful why she's such a wonderful leader and thinker is because she practiced what we say in clinical practice, active listening. And Diego mentioned this too. After I, met with everyone and saw procedures and everything, we met, and she really wanted to know my perspective on the procedures. What were my thoughts about it? What critiques did I have about it? And she really wanted to know my thoughts and insights. And I still remember her, whenever I would have discussions with her, how she would pull the information from you, her yes, and, she would keep trying to get you to, tell me more yes. And she just brings you in, and you open up, and, you describe things even if, you wouldn't have thought about it otherwise until she pulls it out of you. And I think that really meant a lot to me as, a junior investigator in particular. And that my opinion mattered, in an area of research that I was completely new to. And she really pushed that translational collaboration there. And we, what are the drawbacks to the model? She wasn't fearful of saying, okay, well, what's wrong with what we're doing? How can we do it better? And I think that's what makes science improve and move forward. And also I think what in part really makes her science so impactful and visionary is that she cared so deeply about the human conditions that she studied. And I think that's why she pairs up with a lot of clinicians on a regular basis, like me and Diego. She really wants to know about it. And, as I met with her and many times that I've talked with her, she wanted to know, more about the patient conditions. How well are these tasks actually capturing that and, understanding that experience more. And she wanted to be and understand that clinical space more. And I think that's what really makes her model so different and so unique, at least from my perspective. And I think, that's why, her insights and the way that she's conducted her research will forever be a model for that kind of translational work, for people to really put themselves in the space of the other investigators. So negative affect in particular is very inherently nuanced as a phenomenon. It's difficult to measure in any species, but Athina didn't shy away from that. In fact, she realized how important it was and how integral it was, as part of psychiatric conditions. And she took that challenge on. And I think that's why she developed animal models that were so unique and so revolutionary and just so elegant, and why everyone in the field that studies tobacco dependence realizes the importance of it. And she tackled it. And so we continued to work together over the course of my K award. And she encouraged me to add a new task to my laboratory study, a reward responsiveness task that Diego Pizzagalli had developed. And so I was able to integrate that halfway through my laboratory study. And it ended up being probably one of the best things I could do during the course of my study. It was very fruitful. And I developed collaborations with Diego Pizzagalli and Andrei Dervarkian through that process, wonderful collaborators, thanks to Athina. And another time I saw her was in 2009 for the Society for Research on Nicotine and Tobacco Conference, which was in Dublin, Ireland. And as I tended to do, I was probably going to stay in my hotel room and work. But she pulled me out, and we went and walked around Dublin. I wouldn't have done that without Athina. So we walked, through the green, the green courtyards and the architecture, and it was just beautiful. And at that point, she really encouraged me to process the data from the reward responsiveness task. And because of that, we put together the paper for JAMA Psychiatry, which was a collaboration with Diego and Andre. It was 10 years in the works, a labor of love. And if I can take just one more second, we put together a press release on that. And, Athina did it from her side, and I put together the press release from my side. And do I have one more second, or should I? Okay. But anyway, it was wonderful. And, she spoke to what, Diego already presented. But I just have to say she was an amazing leader in psychiatric genetics, a generous mentor, a truly genuine person. I'm grateful to have worked with her and to help move her work forward. And I miss her. And thanks again for the organizers and everyone to make this possible, to honor her memory. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. First of all, I would like to sincerely thank the organizing committee, Mark, Andre, Svetlana, Sam, Shah, for giving me this opportunity to be part of this event, this wonderful event today for Athina. I do not trust my
my brain with the jet lag and a bit of sleeplessness, so I have some notes that I was trying to write down, which don't really account for all the memories that I have with Athina. It's the shortest presentation I've done to date, but I think it's the most difficult. I met Athina when I was still a PhD student in Greece. She had come to Crete. I was doing my PhD at the University of Crete. So she had come to Crete for a talk, and I was always impressed by her work. I was constantly following her publications. So I remember I met her that time, the first time, and I was even more impressed talking to her. Then a couple more times I would meet her at different conferences, the EPPS, for example, in Barcelona, when we sat down and I was telling her that I'd love to join her lab whenever I finish with my PhD, approximately in 2 years' time. After a long process anyway, and quite a few different types of communication, a personal story that I remember is the day when we had a kind of a phone interview. I was in Athens, she was here, when I was offered another position at that time in Baltimore. So I was telling Athina, I was really honest and telling her, I don't know where to go, I don't know what to do. And except for the scientific focus, which was major for me at that point, and I knew very well that in that aspect I was closer to Athina's work. I remember Athina, in a way, trying to convince me, telling me, if you come to San Diego, the weather is so much better. It's like Crete. It's like Crete, it's so close to Crete, so you will get used to the weather and the circumstances so much faster. And I loved hearing that. It already relaxed me at that time. The whole Hellenic neuroscience community loves Athina's work, and they always loved Athina as a person, as a scientist, as a very successful woman, having succeeded in an incredible career abroad. I moved to Athina's lab as a postdoc in January 2007. I worked in Athina's lab from January 2007 until August 2011 through 2 different grants. Laura mentioned them in detail a while ago, the U01 initially and then the U19, and the TRDRP fellowship, which I succeeded in getting in the second effort. Athina's support to me during my work was immense in so many ways I cannot even list, to be honest. I stepped into very deep waters when I moved to the States. I knew nobody at all. I just knew Athina, and I trusted Athina, and I loved her work, and I appreciated everything positive that I had heard about her from colleagues in Greece and abroad. She was an example for me to follow in many ways. Her dedication to work, time management split equally between women and men in her lab, which was a point that was also made a while ago. There was no discrimination. She was supporting all of us and giving her time equally to all of us. Her guidance when starting new tasks and experiments was crucial. She would dedicate a lot of her time into meeting with us, correcting manuscript drafts, correcting grant and fellowship proposals, helping us practice our national or international conference talks, working on our proposals, helping us establish new experimental protocols, formulating new ideas for grant proposals and scholarships, working on them, working on their progress reports, and so many other tasks. Her attention to detail was always something that I strongly remember of her. She would correct numerous drafts, especially in my case in the beginning when I literally had no idea how this process runs. Even if that meant more work for her, as long as we would learn to work on each process correctly and efficiently. Sometimes she would be very tough in her comments, in the writing and the corrections of the drafts, but I learned so much from that process. I learned so much that I'm using the same kind of process now with my own students. When I felt ready to follow my own independent career path, she was very happy for me. I had expressed the reasons why I wanted and I needed to move back to Europe, and she was very happy for me. She still wanted to keep me in the lab, so she tried to convince me to stay a bit longer, but I had already spread my wings. My thought was already back in Europe, and I could not change my mind at that point. She was very proud of it still, especially when I told her I had to set up a lab by myself. I remember her comments in the last 2 or 3 meetings we had, and even at my goodbye party with all the lab, I still remember her comments on those days. Athina's support since I left the States and went to Dublin, Ireland, was still there. We would not keep in touch very often, and not as regularly. Every few months we would keep in touch. But then when we would reconnect, I would often express my excitement of teaching my students, making new connections in the field in Ireland, setting up my lab, a whole brand new behavioral neuroscience lab. At the university that I've mentioned to a couple of colleagues today, doesn't have a strong neuroscience representation yet. The difficulties and struggles I was facing in my new position and role. A couple of times I had great news because of a couple of very important awards that I received just 3 years after my teaching started. And I emailed her and I told her, and that email that I have from Athina, that email response, I've printed and I have it on my desk, and it inspires me every time I'm going through hard times. Her words of love, support, and pride for having played an important role in helping me become a strong and independent and successful academic woman, I will never forget. The last time I saw Athina was 2 years ago, when I was visiting San Diego for a few days after the IBNS. It was possibly the best time I have ever spent with Athina. With great interest and enthusiasm, she was asking me about my life, my work, my family. She was giving me valuable advice on a number of issues, including lab issues. I could then understand her more as well, having experienced some of the struggles and difficulties from a lab PI role now. We were connecting at a whole different level, like never before. Athina was and will always be for me, as a woman and as a neuroscientist, as a female Greek neuroscientist, a model, a role model. Her strength, knowledge, determination, and dedication have always inspired me. And I regularly find myself, as Paul mentioned earlier this morning, especially at difficult circumstances, saying, how would Athina react to this? I'm honored to have been one of her mentees. I'm proud to be a member of the Markou family with all of you here today. And I do agree with everybody else who has spoken before me that it's our responsibility to keep Athina's legacy. Thank you very much.